Chris Cuomo joins us now. And Chris, you mentioned this fear of a national gun registry. Take a look at the new CNN ORC poll. 2 out of 3 people said if the government ever made a list of gun owners, it would use that list to take guns away from people, which is also something the NRA believes. Good morning. I'm Carol Costello. Thank you for being with me. A CNN special this morning, Guns Under Fire. All day we're focusing on background checks, their impact, and the arguments for and against them. A subject that's right on target because, yes, there has been a breakthrough in the Senate on that very thing, background checks. A bipartisan deal will make it to the floor of the Senate maybe as soon as Thursday. Our chief congressional correspondent, Dana Bash, is on it. So, Dana, what exactly is in this deal?
Well, Carol, you know, background checks right now are only required at licensed firearms dealers. And so what this would do is expand that requirement to include 2 new areas, gun shows and internet sales. So it's important to know that this falls short of the universal background checks for all private sales that the president and other Democrats are calling for. But in talking to gun control advocates, they are still saying that this is a big breakthrough because it does expand current law. And most importantly, it would require the seller to keep a record of the sale on the background check. Now, that really is the key here for gun control advocates, because a lot of Republicans, especially who say they're for background checks, refuse to accept keeping a record, even if it's a paper record. And that's because they say they fear that it eventually will go into a national registry and it will threaten civil liberties. But law enforcement sources say that this is really critical in keeping records because it's the only way that they can make sure that these background checks are really enforceable. Now, this is a deal between 2 key senators, both of whom have very strong ratings from the NRA, a Democrat and Republican, Joe Manchin of West Virginia, Pat Toomey of Pennsylvania. We expect them to announce it in just 2 hours from now. Then the next step, of course, is that they're going to have to find that magic number, 60 votes, because anything that is this controversial will have to get past somebody in the Senate trying to block it.
Okay, so, and you're talking about filibuster. I mean, has the threat of a filibuster faded completely, or are we still in danger, or could debate start as soon as tomorrow?
The short answer, the short-term answer is yes, debate is expected to start tomorrow. The Senate will need to vote to start debate. There are still people who are going to vote no, but it does not look like they have this 60 votes to do that. So we do expect there to be a vote, and the debate will begin tomorrow. When you talk about the idea of filibuster, there's no question that as we see this debate go through, which is going to be, Carol, probably about 2 weeks, and you're going to see votes on amendment after amendment, probably all of them are going to require a 60-vote threshold. That's kind of just the way it works. And then at the end of the day, once the Senate is ready to vote on whatever package they come up with through all these amendment votes, then that is also likely to require 60 votes. So, you know, the term filibuster is sort of used in different ways, but I think anything that you see that will be voted on is very likely to need a 60-vote threshold. And when it comes to this particular deal that we just talked about on background checks, I'm told that this could actually be maybe the first amendment that they vote on as soon as tomorrow or maybe early next week.
All right, we'll see. Dana Bash, thanks so much. So all this talk about expanding background checks, what's wrong with the background checks already on the books? CNN's Chris Cuomo explores that side of the story.
Chris.
Mike, what can I do for you?
I'm looking for home protection shotgun.
Okay, I'm going to bring you down to our shotgun section.
Seems simple, but there's more to it than you might think. Every purchase from a licensed dealer requires a federal background check.
Are you under indictment? No. Have you been convicted of any felony? No.
27 personal questions, including criminal and mental health history, all requiring government confirmation. Add potential state and city laws, thousands across the country, and it could feel like an obstacle course.
There's a background check for the rifle. Then if you live in the city, there's the rifle shotgun card. Then if you have a pistol, it's also pistol license.
But this pales in comparison to the pain the nation felt on December 14th in Newtown, Connecticut. The most vulnerable victimized by dangerous weapons in the wrong, sick hands. CNN's latest poll shows people want it to stop. Calls to do something, resulting in demands for expanded background checks, despite the fact they wouldn't have stopped the Newtown shooter.
We know that background checks can work, but the problem is loopholes in the current law let so many people avoid background checks altogether.
gun control advocates want all gun sales, not just those by dealers, subject to background checks.
This background check law that we're talking about is enforcing the law.
Colin Goddard works for the Brady Center to Prevent Gun Violence. He is a gun violence victim, shot 4 times at Virginia Tech 6 years ago.
How are you supposed to know if someone's got a felony record? How are you supposed to know if someone's got a restraining order or if someone's got a dangerous mental illness without doing a background check? You're supposed to, what, look at them really hard?
Gun rights advocates fear checking all sales could lead to a national gun registry and maybe confiscation. The larger concern, making it harder to buy a gun lawfully may not stop massacres and handgun violence. Before owning this Long Island gun store, owner Mike Marinello was a police officer for 11 years. And your experience as a cop, did that hold true?
In 11 years, I've never had a legal pistol licensee use his firearm in a crime.
Gun control advocates say the nearly 2 million people who've been denied guns is proof of effectiveness.
Most of those people, it turns out, were not on prohibited lists. Most of them were false positives. Their name looked like somebody else. There was records in there that were incomplete. The first thing you have to do is take the system you have and get it fixed and make it work.
Mike says the big issue isn't the law, but enforcement.
If somebody comes in and they're hell-bent on buying a gun, we let them fill out the form, and they fail. And then, in a perfect world, alcohol, tobacco, and firearms will go arrest that person.
That's the big catch, right?
Current laws on the books would make this state the safest in the union if they were enforced.
In my case,
this transaction is a proceed.
The system worked. After 25 minutes of completing forms and waiting for approval, I had my shotgun.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Chris Cuomo joins us now. And Chris, you mentioned this fear of a national gun registry. Take a look at the new CNN ORC poll. 2 out of 3 people said if the government ever made a list of gun owners, it would use that list to take guns away from people, which is also something the NRA believes.
There's only 2 reasons for a federal list on gun owners: to either tax them or take them. It's the only reason. And anyone who says that's excessive, President Obama says you're an absolutist.
And many gun control advocates say that's ridiculous. So, Chris, why are people making the leap between background checks and taking away guns?
Well, you know, there's an old expression, just because you're paranoid doesn't mean people aren't coming after you. You know, Carrie, you'll look at certain municipalities, and already they've made illegal certain weapons, and you're forced to get rid of them. Well, what's the difference between taking it and forcing me to get rid of it? That's the rationale. But it's also coming from something else, Carol. This issue has become a political football, and when it becomes about emotion and politics, things get distorted. Of course, checking all sales would be helpful in knowing who has weapons. Of course, that's something we should put in place if done right. Now, that winds up becoming sophisticated because you have to remember, background checks at the end of the day only deal with people who want to get a weapon lawfully. And so many crimes are done with illegally obtained weapons. So the point becomes this. Do you want the checks? Yes. How do we do it? We have to figure it out. The politicians don't talk much about that. But there's a bigger point, Carol, that's being lost in this discussion that's very troubling to victims of crime and even people who cover crimes. And that is, when you look at the massacres that we all want to stop, especially when we look at those faces from Newtown, let's not forget that mother of that shooter got those guns legally and rightfully. His mental illness propelled his madness. Where is the discussion about the mental illness? Where is it in this bill? Where's the political enthusiasm behind making it so that we have a better mental health system? It's not there. All of these crimes that happen with guns, how do we enforce those crimes? How long do those people go to jail? Do they just get out? Because that does the most to deter crime, is punishing crime. Where is that in this discussion? The concern is checks matter, Carol, but they're not the only way to stop gun violence. They're probably not even at the top of the list.
All right, Chris Cuomo, many thanks to you. In just about 20 minutes, CNN's exclusive interview with Gabby Giffords and her husband. Hear why Giffords says it doesn't bother her to hear gunshots, even though, as you know, she was shot in the head. Chris Cuomo joins us now. And Chris, you mentioned this fear of a national gun registry. Take a look at the new CNN ORC poll. 2 out of 3 people said if the government ever made a list of gun owners, it would use that list to take guns away from people, which is also something the NRA believes.